In this year's postseason, one of the big-time talking points and narratives has been Jimmy Butler carrying his team to the NBA Finals. And while Jimmy is playing fantastic and overachieving, this narrative to a degree is kind of overblown. As someone like Jay Williams had one of the worst takes I've ever seen, saying Jimmy is carrying a team to the finals unlike any player he's ever witnessed. Now look, I'm not going to hate on Jimmy too much, but after Game 2 versus Boston, since that moment, he's been pretty meh and even subpar for superstar standards. When it comes to players carrying rosters, carrying teams to the finals, a lot of times it's all about narrative and not the actual facts. Long story short, Jay Williams' awful take reminded me of Kendrick Perkins having a very similar take. And for Perk, he was debating Jordan versus LeBron, who had better competition and who carried teams better in their careers. And as we know, LeBron James, he's carried numerous rosters, especially in 2018. But when talking about carry jobs, one of the most overrated of all time also features LeBron James. This run from 2007. And I think for a lot of NBA fans, what they do, they see this roster, these players, not many stars, let alone superstars, and automatically assume this team was garbage and a terrible supporting cast. And look, I'm not going to say this Cavs team was the 2017 Warriors, 96 Bulls, but the overall narrative about them was 100% false and misleading. And when we look at the East back then, this Cavs team in that conference really wasn't that bad, as the best team in the East that year was Detroit, who barely cracked 50 wins. And if you compare that Eastern Conference to the West in the same year, it's really not even comparable, as Dallas won nearly 70 games, the Suns won 61, Spurs 58, Rockets 52, and the Jazz 51. The 5th seed in the West had a better record than Cleveland in the East. And looking at the worst teams in the NBA, 3 out of the 4 came from the East, that being Boston, Atlanta, and Milwaukee. Now, looking at Cleveland's actual roster, past LeBron James, it's not as bad as you would think, as they had Big Z, a 2-time All-Star, who's an All-Star in 05, Larry Hughes, who 2 years prior was an All-Defensive Team member, leading the NBA in steals and averaging 22 a game. You also had Drew Gooden, a double-double machine, a young Anderson Varejao, even Pavlovich and Gibson, who were 40% shooters from behind the arc. Given this team's era, the conference they played in, they were an above-average team and an above-average supporting cast. And actually that year, they were 2nd in the NBA in rebounds, 1st in offensive rebounds, 4th in defensive rating, and 5th in points per game allowed. Again, not some dynasty, but not exactly a bum squad fans would have you think. And my biggest problem with this run, and why I think it's so overrated, is the competition in the playoffs for LeBron's Cavs. As in round 1, they played the Wizards, who were 41-41. In this series, Gilbert Arenas, who was a 28-point per game scorer and All-Star, was not playing. Also, Caron Butler, a fellow All-Star averaged 19 points per game, was out this series. That Wizards team was down 2 All-Stars and only had Antoine Jamison going solo. Antoine by himself averaged 32 points and arguably outplayed LeBron this series. Looking at round 2, once again, a 41-41 team in the New Jersey Nets. And this Nets team, like the Wizards, was facing severe injuries. As their second leading scorer, Ned Christic, was out in this series. My point being, both the Nets and Wizards were not good teams by any measure, and they were also hurt and battling injuries. Now, looking to the East Finals, finally you would think we have a great team in the Pistons who are former NBA champions. Well, not exactly. The 07 Pistons were not the 04 Pistons, as this team had no Ben Wallace and no Larry Brown coaching them. And if you know the 04 Pistons, those 2 guys were the heart and soul of that team. Now, looking at the actual series, the one game everyone goes to is Game 5 in Detroit, where LeBron James scored 48 points. LeBron in this game undoubtedly carried his team to a huge W. I'm not downplaying that at all. But looking at the entire series in totality, LeBron for the series was not carrying this roster consistently. As in Game 1, he had 10 points on 5-15 shooting. Game 2, 19 points on 7-19 shooting with 6 turnovers. Game 4, 25 points on 8-19 shooting. And in Game 6, 20 points on 3-11 shooting. That right there in Cleveland was the closeout game to make the NBA Finals. And for LeBron James standards, even at age 22, he was not good in this game. And quite frankly, he wasn't the best player on his own team, as Boobie Gibson scored 31 points on nearly 80% shooting, and in the fourth quarter had 19 points, a game high, after entering the fourth quarter down by 1 point. Things like that never get talked about with the 07 Cavs, and for the 20th time, I'm not saying this team was an all-time great team. All I'm saying is LeBron in this run didn't carry them like his other runs. If you look at 09, 2018, even 2010, I would say LeBron in those teams carried his team harder than in 07. As looking at his last two series, that have been the NBA Finals and East Finals, he averaged 24.2 points, 8.3 boards, 7.8 assists, 4.2 turnovers on 41-27 and 72 splits. Definitely pretty impressive for a 22-year-old. But for superstar standards and carrying standards, that doesn't cut it for me. And looking at the entire run, LeBron's efficiency wasn't LeBron James-like, as in the NBA Finals and East Finals, 6 games out of 10, he was under 40%, and 4 times under 35%. This 07 Cavs run, it's a weird combo of nostalgia with a hint of revisionist history. And for someone like Kendrick Perkins, who talks about this run, those facts are never brought up and never acknowledged. As for Jordan, I think in his early career, he had plenty of runs that rival and even better than LeBron's run in 07. First up, look at 1988. Jordan that year was in his 4th season and led the Bulls to 50 wins, the exact same mark as LeBron's Cavs. But looking at the actual playoff play and Jordan's production, it was 10 times better than LeBron James in 07, averaging 36 points, 7.1 boards, 4.7 assists, 2.4 steals, 1.1 blocks on 53% shooting. Jordan that year for the Bulls led them in points, assists, steals, blocks, and was second in rebounds. And looking at his supporting cast, it was Sam Vincent, a journeyman point guard, Horace Grant, a rookie, Charles Oakley, a decent double-double guy, and Scottie Pippen, also a rookie. Compare that roster to the 07 Cavs. It is eerily similar. And looking at the entire playoffs, just speaking offensively, the Bulls in total had 948 points. Jordan by himself had well over 300. In this run, Mike was responsible for 38.3% of his team's points. Compare that to LeBron James and the 07 Cavs. LeBron in his run was responsible for 28.2%, just over 10% less points than Jordan. And if you want to talk defense, Jordan 88 was a better defender than LeBron, as he won the Defensive Player of the Year, was first team all defense, led the NBA in steals, and was first in blocks among guards. Why this playoff run from Jordan isn't nearly as recognizable is because MJ's East was actually super competitive, as in that East, you had the bad boy Pistons with 4 prime Hall of Famers. Even looking at 89, the very next season, Jordan once again had a subpar team in a loaded East. Look at the standings. Detroit was first with over 60 wins, Cleveland was second with 57, the Knicks and Hawks at 52, and the Bucks even had 49. Compare Jordan's East that year to the 07 East, and it's not even a competition. And once again, looking at Jordan's overall play, he was much better than LeBron in 07, averaging 34.8 points, 7.6 assists, 7.0 boards, 2.5 steals on 51% shooting. And that Bulls team as a whole was very comparable to the 07 Cavs. As in 89, they were 5th in points allowed, 11th in defensive rating, 12th in offensive rating, and 17th in scoring. Look at the 07 Cavs. Very similar. 5th in opponent scoring, 4th in defensive rating, 18th in offensive rating, and 19th in scoring. Objectively speaking, both those teams were relatively the same. And both Jordan and LeBron in those runs lost the eventual champions. Jordan to the Pistons and LeBron to the Spurs. The only difference is Michael Jordan in his run played well versus the champs, got 2 wins off them, and faced them before the NBA Finals. And looking at the 07 Spurs, for their entire playoff run, there was only one team that didn't beat them a single time. That team, you ask? The Cavaliers in the NBA Finals. The champion of the East was so bad, the first round in the West was more competitive than the NBA Finals. And almost the exact opposite, the 89 Pistons didn't lose one game to any team outside of Chicago. I made this video for a couple of reasons: to explain carrying teams, competition, and why it's so important, my context is always needed. And for players like Jordan, like LeBron, your Kobe's and Shaq's, they've all carried teams in varying degrees. But for Jordan specifically, there's a weird narrative out there that he didn't carry teams and always had a stacked roster. I hope this video exposed that, exposed the 07 Cavs, how they weren't a dumpster fire team, and has killed a lot of narratives about carrying teams and competition. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.